Hannah's POV. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital because of Liam. I grew fascinated with nurses and doctors. I thought of them as modern-day superheroes. The amount of work they did to keep my brother alive was unbelievable. My mother worked as a nurse at the infirmary in the rogue town we lived in. She was a healer, and I admired her more than anything because of that. I always wanted to help her, and I grew fascinated by how it all worked. After she died, I was all Liam had. I didn't have enough money to continue his treatments on my own, so my father paid for his medical bills. The only problem with that was that my father wouldn't allow me to see him when Liam was in the hospital. He hardly let me see him when he was home too. He would be barricaded in his room and only have my father and Naomi around to care for him. They kept him away from me so they could use me however they pleased. I always felt so helpless that I couldn't be there for my brother. I hated myself, so I spent a lot of time studying. I wanted to be a healer like the doctors and nurses I've seen in the hospitals, like my mother. I wanted to be able to care for Liam on my own, so we no longer have to depend on my father and Naomi. I want to be able to care for him, so we don't have to depend on Sebastian. I was surprised when Sebastian agreed to let me intern at the hospital. It's not like I was asking permission, but I brought it up during one of our meals. He stared at me puzzled for a moment, narrowing his eyes, and I thought he was going to lose his temper. I was admittedly nervous, and I could feel my heart beating rapidly against my rib cage. "When do you start?" he asked. His voice was oddly calm. It was almost chilling. "I don't know yet," I told him. "Nothing is set in stone. I just wanted to bring it up." "I can make some calls and get you in soon," Sebastian said, looking away from me to continue eating. I stared at him with surprise for a moment, but I didn't argue. "Thank you," was all I managed to say. He grunted in return. It only took a few days for them to call me and offer me the interning job. So on my first day, I brushed my hair out of my face and put it in a low ponytail. I threw on a light pink blazer and black scrub pants. Then I put on the long white coat they supplied me and headed to the hospital. It's been a few weeks since I started this internship at the PAX hospital, and I love it more with each passing day. I even healed someone with a medication I formulated on my own, and my teacher and superior, Dr. Davis, was so impressed. I told him I learned how to formulate medication from my mother. "Well, we are lucky to have you at our practice, Hannah," Dr. Davis said, smiling his appreciation. The patient was also appreciative now that his flu symptoms were gone. "As your first healing work, this calls for a group picture," Davis said with a laugh as he took out his camera. I blushed, but eagerly stepped between them to take a picture. I stared up at Dr. Davis with admiration and excitement as one of the nurses snapped the picture. As we pulled apart, I couldn't help but think about Sebastian. The full moon was fast approaching, and I knew during that time Sebastian goes mad. I worried that he would kill me before I could make it as a healer. "Dr. Davis, may I ask you a question?" I asked as we left the patient's room and started down the hall. It was time for us to make our rounds and visit other patients, but I couldn't stop thinking about Sebastian and what I can do to help his madness. "That's what I'm here for," he reminded me. I felt foolish considering he was my teacher, and answering my questions was his current job as he taught me. "Right," I chuckled. "As you may know, my husband is the Alpha King. He has the reputation of going mad during the full moon, a madness so bad that he kills." My voice trailed off as I met his eyes. "Wolf madness," Dr. Davis said. I nodded once and said nothing as I stared down at my feet sheepishly. "And you are worried his wolf madness will get you killed?" It wasn't a secret that I was frightened. Anybody in their right minds would be frightened, especially after hearing what happened to his ex-Luna. "Yes," I admitted. "I wanted to know if wolf madness had a cure." "There's no cure that I can think of," he told me with a frown. "I think it also depends on how he obtained this madness in the first place." Of course, there are stories of how Sebastian's wolf madness came about. He went to war against the vampires. Somewhere within that war he became disfigured, and when he returned, he wasn't the same as he was when he left. Nobody knows what happened during that war, and nobody dared to ask. Dr. Davis stared around my face as I remained silent, processing my thoughts. But we could do some research and figure something out, Dr. Davis suggested. I rose my gaze to his. How about we work together after work today? We can go to the library and do some studying. I smiled and nodded my thanks to him. As the end of the day approached, I grew eager to get out of work and head to the library. Dr. Davis was waiting for me at the entrance of the hospital, but before I reached him, I ran into a familiar figure. She stood before me with her hands on her hip and her thin red lips pressed together firmly. Her dark green eyes poured into me, making me feel uncomfortable. Nancy. She was not only my colleague, but also Amy's best friend. I knew she worked at the hospital because she was always bragging about it. Since I started here, I've only had a couple of encounters with her, but for the most part, I've been trying to avoid her. I knew whatever I said and did would get back to Amy eventually, so I had to be careful around her. "Where do you think you are going?" she asked, staring at me and then gazing over at Dr. Davis. "It's not your business," I said in return as I started walking past her. "You're leaving with him?" she asked, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. She's made it painfully obvious that she has a thing for Dr. Davis. I didn't blame her. Anyone would be a fool if they didn't have a small crush on him in some shape or form. He was a handsome man with sun-kissed skin and beachy blonde hair that was tousled on his head from him constantly running his fingers through it. He had these large brown eyes that anyone could get lost in, not to mention he was built masculine with a strong form. I wondered what his wolf form looked like. "Stop fantasizing about him," Nora hissed. "We are married." "We are hardly married," I reminded her. "Eventually, he's going to kill us." "He won't kill us," Nora said slowly. "Let's just figure out how to help him without getting distracted by Dr. Davis." I turned back to Nancy, who was still watching me with intensity. "It's work-related," I tried to assure her. "Nothing more." I turned away and followed closely after Dr. Davis, but I could still feel Nancy watching with fury radiating off her fair features. Sebastian's POV. Sebastian sat in his office staring at the computer screen. His fists were clenched around the computer mouse, and his jaw tightened as he stared at the picture before him. Hannah was in her pink blazer and a long white coat. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She wasn't wearing makeup, but she didn't need makeup because of her natural beauty. She was like an angel in white. She was smiling sweetly, staring up at the doctor that stood beside her. She hadn't smiled like that at Sebastian in a long time. A knot formed in his stomach, and he could feel the resentment and anger rising within Eric. He swallowed hard, trying to get the feeling out of his body. But he couldn't help but feel his jealousy taking over. With a click, the mouse to his computer shattered Nancy's POV. Nancy stood in the corner of the library. A darkened shadow covered her, so she was out of view from Hannah and Dr. Davis. She watched them from a distance as they huddled with one another and talked in low voices. A furious rage went through Nancy as she stared at her beloved, smiling and laughing at that Omega bitch. Everyone in the hospital knew that Dr. Davis was off limits to everyone except her. She's worked with him for years, and she's always wanted to be with him. He was one of the toughest doctors in the kingdom out of all the hospitals. He was always so serious and rarely ever smiled. He was all about his work and his research, and he never wanted to be bothered by anyone. He never took the time out of the day to help others, which is why it was so surprising that he volunteered to be Hannah's teacher. As soon as he saw her standing in the lobby of the hospital, he requested that he be the one who supervised her. Nancy felt a rush of jealousy flowing through her body, but she said nothing. She knew there'd be nothing she could do to change his mind, and if she tried, he would turn his anger on her. She couldn't risk her job. He was still her boss and could fire her at any moment. He never once looked at Nancy in the way he's looking at Hannah. He hardly even notices Nancy exists, despite all she does for him in the hospital. For a little while, Hannah sat alone, reading through the mound of books that was laid out in front of her. But then, Dr. Davis joined her moments later, bring her hot cocoa from the little cafe outside the library. Nancy felt fury rising through her as she clenched her fists, trying to keep herself under control. She opened the camera on her phone and snapped a picture of the 2 of them, sending it to Amy. She wrote out a text with the image. Look, this little bitch not only stole your wolf king, but also, my man, this fucking woman. Mom! Amy cried. She was furious as she clutched her phone in her hands. Her body was trembling with fury, and Naomi looked almost startled as Amy rushed into the living room. Look at this picture. That bitch is unbelievable. It was an image of Hannah at the library, getting a little too close and comfortable with a handsome doctor. Amy knew that Nancy has been in love with this doctor for the longest time, and now Hannah was swooping in and taking him from her. Naomi looked at the photo for a long while, trying to process what she was seeing. Let's get this printed, Naomi suggested. Then we will present this photo to the Wolf King. Amy stared up at her mother with excitement lingering in her eyes. As soon as the Wolf King sees this image, his fury will be unavoidable. Hannah will be the one who feels his wrath. Within a few hours, Amy and Naomi made their way to the palace. Thankfully, Hannah wasn't there, but unfortunately, neither was Sebastian. I need to present something to the Wolf King, Naomi said, holding the envelope with the picture for the butler to see. He's not here at the moment. I can take it for him thought and give it to him once he arrives, the butler offered. Naomi thought about it for a moment before nodding, handing it over to him. Please put it in his study where he can find it easily. It's important, Naomi told him firmly. Yes, ma'am, the butler agreed. Sebastian's POV. Sebastian sat in his office, staring at his computer, trying to focus on his work. But he couldn't think of anything else besides Hannah. He had no idea why she was invading his mind the way she was, but all he could think about was her beautiful face and her bright eyes. He thought about how she used to smile at him, and his heart ached immediately. She doesn't smile at him like that anymore. He missed the days when she smiled, like when they ate from the food cart. She was so happy. That was the first time Sebastian had smiled and laughed like that. He didn't even think that emotion was possible for him. When will you stop denying her? Eric asked. You want her more than you have ever wanted anybody. She won't even speak to me, Sebastian reminded his wolf. There's nothing we can. You can accept her as our chosen mate. What? You can't deny that you feel the mate bond when you are with her. If you mark her, it'll only make that bond stronger, for both of you. Mark her? Mark her as their mate? Speaking those words out loud sounded ridiculous. But since Eric planted the thought in his head, he hasn't been able to stop thinking about it. His chest ached, and he no longer wanted to continue his work for the day. He switched his computer off and started to head home. Louis was already waiting for him outside in the car, as he does every day all day in case Sebastian needs to get somewhere quickly. Good evening, Your Majesty, Louis greeted as Sebastian slid into the car. Take me home, Sebastian ordered, trying to keep his voice even and unbothered. Louis knew it was a bit early to be going home for the day, but he didn't argue or say anything. Sebastian's focus was on going home so he could see Hannah. He wanted to see her pretty face and try to get her to smile again. He hated it when he saw that picture of her smiling up at that doctor. However, the caption read that it was a recognition photo because Hannah healed a patient on her own. As jealous as Sebastian felt, he was also oddly proud of her. Stop at the nearest florist's, Sebastian ordered. He made a decision to get Hannah some flowers. That made her smile before, and it can make her smile again. Besides, she deserved the flowers after her achievements. They stopped, and he purchased a bouquet of the most beautiful flowers they had before returning home. Once they got into the palace, Sebastian went to search for Hannah. He figured she was probably in their bedroom, or maybe she was in Liam's room. She's not home yet, Your Majesty, the butler said as Sebastian processed his thoughts out loud. Sebastian paused at the grand stairway and turned to the butler. What do you mean she's not home? She was supposed to finish work a couple of hours ago, Sebastian said. He was getting red in the face. It wasn't like her to not return home right away, and it was starting to get dark. I don't know, the butler answered, but her stepmother and sister were here not long ago. They gave me something to give to you, said it was important. I left it in your study. Sebastian's frown deepened and his grip around the flower's stems tightened. What could they have possibly needed to give him? Whatever it was, he knew it wasn't going to be good. Sebastian had to contain himself before Eric lost control. He could already feel his wolf growing more upset with each passing moment. The full moon was approaching, and he couldn't risk losing control. He took a deep breath and decided to go into his study while he waits for Hannah. As he got into his study, he found an envelope on his desk. He grabbed it and ripped it open, revealing a picture. It was a picture of Hannah. She was sitting in the library and giving a smile that Sebastian recognized well, but hasn't seen in a while. Except she was giving that smile to another man, Hannah's POV. "You didn't have to get me the hot cocoa," I said softly as I continued reading through the books. Dr. Davis eyed me carefully, as I took some notes on some natural ways to calm a wolf's madness. "I know," he said, narrowing his eyes at me, "but it's cold out and your nose was getting red. As cute as it was, I didn't want you getting frostbite." He spoke softly, and he touched my arm as he said those words. I almost felt a bit uncomfortable at the gesture, but I gave him a pleasant smile, and we continued our studies. My focus was to find out ways to calm Sebastian, especially during the full moon. If I was going to be married to him, I didn't want to live my life in fear. I wanted to know he was going to be okay, even when he loses control. A few things caught my eyes as I scanned the books. It was saying that during wolf madness, even if it wasn't the full moon, he could still lose control if he was too tired. "I think I found something," Dr. Davis said, pointing at the book in front of him. "It says here that there's a perfume that can calm the nerves of a wolf during their madness." I looked at the image of the perfume. It came in a small red bottle, and it looked elegant. "They sell them in stores around here," Dr. Davis added, "but the ingredients come from the East, so it's extremely expensive." "It's okay," I said, still staring at the image. "I'll try anything." I went straight to the perfume store after I left the library. I parted ways with Dr. Davis because it was getting late, and I knew he had to be up early for work the next morning. He helped me out enough for the evening, and I didn't want to take up too much of his time, even though he kept insisting he came with me. "It's getting dark. You shouldn't be traveling alone at night," he said. Nora wanted to laugh at him. "We've spent our lives alone. We loved the night," but I didn't say that to him. I shook his hand and thanked him again for helping me before heading toward the center of the kingdom. The perfume store was close to the palace, and I was grateful that they were still open. However, they were closing shortly. I showed them the image of the perfume and explained what it was for. They went into the back to retrieve it. As I waited for them to return, I looked around at all the different perfume bottles. They were all so elegant and beautiful. I've never even been in a perfume store before. Growing up, we could never afford such luxury items. I felt out of place standing in the store. I took a bottle off the shelf. It was a light pink bottle with a rose quartz cap. I twisted the cap off and sprayed it on my arm. I was instantly filled with a beautiful rosy scent that practically calmed me right away. As the store worker returned, I put the rosy perfume back on the shelf and completed my purchase for Sebastian's perfume. I've never even purchased perfume for myself before. I felt silly buying perfume for a man and not for myself. But this was for Sebastian's greater good. This was said to calm the nerves of a wolf during their maddening stages. I just hoped that he wouldn't suddenly go mad once I present the perfume to him. I've been trying to avoid him for some time because I was worried he would lose control. I just wanted him to feel better. Once I finished at the perfume store, I walked back to the palace. I hurried quickly because I knew Sebastian would be wondering where I was. As I entered the palace, I instantly smelled the scent of smoke, which made me cough and gag. My eyes started watering as I followed the scent into the living quarters. Sebastian sat on the couch with his legs crossed and was smoking a cigar. His eyes narrowed in on me, and I felt my body tensing. There was something wrong. I could see it on his face, and I grew more nervous with each breath I took. "Come," he ordered. His voice sounded cold and threatening. Despite how nervous I was, I knew it was in my best interest to not disobey him, so I walked toward him. "What's wrong?" I asked, thankful my voice wasn't quivering. I knew he was in a bad mood. I could feel it in the aura around him. The way he was looking at me was also not natural, and I felt worried. He exhaled a puff of light blue smoke before grabbing onto my arm with force, tightening his grip. I winced as he tugged me onto his lap and wrapped his firm arms around me, holding me in place. His lips were on mine instantly, and I felt his tongue invading my mouth, hungrily and possessively. I accidentally let go of the perfume, and I heard it shattering to the ground. He pulled away from me, and his eyes landed on the perfume. He scoffed, his eyes staring back at me, darkening with what looked like disgust and hatred. "Expecting gifts from another man behind my back?" he asked, his tone dark, and it sent a chill down my spine. "I warned you, do your duties as my Luna, or I'll kill you and your adulterer," he hissed, his lip curling up as he spoke. I felt my body tremble under his tightened grip. "You're crazy," I heard myself crying back to him. I paused before continuing. I looked at the wild look in his eyes. He must have sent someone to follow me. He must have known I was late because I was at the library with Dr. Davis. This was just a horrible misunderstanding. "Listen, Dr. Davis is just my teacher. I bought this perfume for." "Still want to argue, I see," he hissed, stopping my words. Sebastian shot to his feet, nearly flinging me to the ground, but his arms were wrapped around my waist, preventing me from going anywhere. He shoved me and stumbled towards the bar that sat against the wall. He rushed towards me quickly, pressing his body against mine and making it impossible for me to move beyond the bar. He lifted me so I sat against the wooden paneling. I wanted to scream out in fear, but his hands were around my throat, cutting off my air supply. I felt my heart shattering in my chest as I looked at the terrifying look in his eyes. I coughed out, trying to get him to release me, but his hold only tightened the more I struggled. I should have never bought him that perfume. I closed my eyes. I could feel myself growing lightheaded. "It's not what you think," I said between gasps of air and coughing. "Does that man's cocoa taste good?" he seethed. "No," I coughed. Tears began welling up in my eyes. If he kept this up, he was going to kill me for sure. He mentioned that my saliva calms him, which is why he wanted me to kiss him frequently and be around him often. I looked into his eyes as they started growing sapphire. It was the same shade I saw the first night when he tried to have his way with me. Before he stopped himself, I tried to gain as much courage as I had left and pressed my lips against his. I hungrily kissed him as he had previously kissed me. I shoved my tongue into his mouth and gave him as much of my saliva as I could. I wrapped my shaking arms around him and pulled my body close to him. He released my neck and wrapped his arms around me, kissing me back. He sucked my mouth viciously as I kissed him with nothing but vengeance. Tears sprang from my eyes as relief flooded through me. I knew at that moment that my life was saved. But I couldn't help but wonder until when. I could feel his body calming down around the same time as the fluorescent aroma of the perfume invaded my nose. I wondered if he was calming down because of my saliva or because of the perfume that was filling the air. The kiss lasted more than 10 minutes, and Sebastian's body was almost completely relaxed. Without thinking about it, I dug my teeth into his bottom lip, startling him. He winced in pain as he jumped away from me, releasing me from the bar. I jumped down and hurriedly left the room. Nancy's POV. "Attention!" Dr. Davis called the hospital staff. Everyone collectively united around the area. Dr. Davis stood beside Hannah, who looked pleased. A faint smile spread across Dr. Davis's lips as he looked at Hannah, but then it fell once he addressed the rest of the staff. "I wanted to recognize the hard work of the newest member of our staff. She's been working hard, and her achievements show for that. You should all look up to Hannah going forward." This made Nancy's blood boil as she stared between the two of them. It wasn't fair. She worked twice as hard and twice as long. Then Hannah shows up and out of the blue takes everything from her. Amy had mentioned that they were scheming to get rid of Hannah once and for all, but that day couldn't come soon enough. Nancy was done with dealing with Hannah's bullshit. Over her dead body would she ever look up to that bitch? She turned away as the others rounded Hannah and congratulated her on her achievements. She stormed towards the room where they drew up prescriptions for each patient. It was a room of small cubicles, with their assigned desks where they did paperwork. Nancy went to Hannah's desk and grabbed her folder of prescriptions for her patients. She scoffed as she scanned each document. She took a pencil and erased some of the prescriptions, changing them to something completely different. A small smile spread across her lips as she finished changing each of the prescriptions. Let's see them praise her once her patients get prescribed the wrong medication, Nancy sneered. Queen Magnolia's POV. Magnolia made her way to the kitchen on the eve of the full moon. She knew of Naomi's plan of having a servant drug Sebastian's food. However, she didn't know which servant it was. As she reached the servant, she heard the head chef speaking to the kitchen staff. We must be sure there is no alcohol or other stimulants in the food for the next few nights, just until after the full moon. We need to keep as cautious as possible when serving the king's food. Understood? Yes, chef, the other kitchen staff said as they continued working. The head chef made eye contact with Queen Magnolia and bowed instantly. Your Majesty, the chef said, I didn't see you there. May I get you something? Magnolia stared around at the wide eyes, trying to figure out which one of these traitors was working with Naomi. They all had motives and they all looked guilty. Her eyes landed on a young boy who looked particularly guilty. Magnolia recognized him as the boy she hired not long ago, since the last maid mysteriously turned up dead. She also knew this boy didn't belong in the kitchen. They met eyes, and he instantly turned away, his face reddening. Magnolia pressed her lips in a thin line and turned to face the head chef. No, she finally answered. I was just seeing how tonight's meal was going. The chef looked surprised by her answer. Oh, he said. It'll be served in a few hours. I was just telling the others that we are steering clear of stimulants in the food, just until after the full moon. Anything that'll provoke the king during his maddening stage will be avoided. See that it is, Magnolia said, keeping her tone even and a bit cold. She glanced at the young boy once again before turning and leaving. She made a mental note to get to the kitchen again tomorrow, to see if the boy was still there. The next day approached, and Magnolia returned to the kitchen, except she got to the kitchen a little later, to try and catch the boy in the act. She was sure if he was to drug the food, it would be last minute after it's already been prepared by the head chef. Just as the chef finished cooking the meal, he went to clean himself up while the other kitchen staff worked to plate and serve the food. Sebastian and Hannah haven't gotten to the dining hall yet, so it would be a little bit for the food to actually be served. Magnolia poked her head through the door just as the young boy she saw the day prior sprinkled dust on one of the plates. He didn't look particularly happy with the task he was doing. She pushed the door open, and he nearly jumped out of his skin. What do you think you're doing? Magnolia asked in a growl. The color on his face completely drained, and he dropped the bottle of drugs to the ground. She watched as his body trembled uncontrollably, and he took a step away. Your Majesty, he said in a hoarse voice. I can explain. Explain why you're drugging the king's food, Magnolia asked, tilting her head to the side as she neared closer to him. I was trying to help him, the boy tried to explain, but he stopped speaking at the sound of Magnolia's chilling laughter. How much is she paying you? His eyes widened. I'm sorry? He asked in a whisper. Don't play stupid with me, Magnolia hissed. You are being paid a large sum of money to drug my stepson's food. How much? $25,000. Magnolia laughed again. That's all? She asked with a shake of her head. You servants will do anything for a small amount of money. It's pathetic. The boy said nothing. He stared at her shocked. I have to admire her efforts, Magnolia said in a sigh. However, what kind of queen would I be if I allowed something like this to happen under my nose? Your Majesty, please, he stammered nervously. I can't let this go unpunished. You understand, don't you? She didn't wait for him to answer. She shifted, allowing her wolf to take over. The vile creature transitioned into a deadly animal. Her blonde fur was thick and sharp like razors. Her teeth were large and pointy like knives. She pounced in the direction of the boy, who was too shocked and terrified to even scream. She bit into his neck, and he cried out in agony as she ripped through his throat. She tasted his blood, oozing onto her large tongue and rinsing down her throat. He only yelled out for a moment. As soon as she released her teeth from his flesh, he fell to the ground. Dead. Hannah. I was disgusted when I watched the camera footage I set up around my cubicle. I knew right away, upon looking at my paperwork, that the prescriptions were all messed up. It wasn't my handwriting, and it was clear that it was erased and rewritten. As soon as I started my internship, I set up cameras around my desk, knowing that Nancy was going to try something. She was Amy's best friend. I would be stupid if I didn't expect the worst. I was glad I was prepared before I went to visit my patients with these prescriptions. I clipped the video file on a USB. I was furious that she would stoop so low and jeopardize these innocent patients, just because she doesn't like me. How could she try to ruin my reputation like that? How could she put them at risk? I saw her typing something on her computer not far from my desk, and I stormed over to her. She glanced up at me with a frown. She didn't even look remotely sorry for her actions. Without saying anything, I plugged the USB into her computer. She narrowed her eyes at me. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked harshly, shooting to her feet. I said nothing as the video played. Her eyes widened as we watched her messing with my paperwork. I turned to her, and before she could say anything, my hand went across her face. Slap! I brushed the thought of Nancy out of my mind and carried on with my day. I had patients to care for, and I couldn't let the immaturity of a colleague distract me. Dr. Davis trusted me enough to make my rounds by myself. Most of my patients were very kind and let me do some test work without any issues. I prescribed the correct medication for them as well. "Doctor, what happened to your bottom lip?" one of my patients asked curiously. Her eyes were narrowed in on my face, and there was concern in her gaze. I frowned and touched my lip. There was a small bump that I hadn't noticed before. I walked over to the mirror on the side of the room and saw that the bump was red. It looked almost like a tooth mark. My cheeks flushed as I thought of Sebastian. He hasn't asked me to kiss him in a long while. We've been distant from one another. I've been avoiding him often, even more since he attacked me the other night. But in the beginning, he requested that I kissed him every day because my saliva calms him. Was Sebastian kissing me while I slept? Sebastian's POV. As the full moon rose gradually, Sebastian ate the last of his food. He could feel his mind going dark and the anger rising through him. He tried to calm his wolf down before it was too late, but he knew from the years of this happening that it was unavoidable. He stared at the spot at the table where Hannah would typically be sitting, but she wasn't home from work yet. He knew the best thing to do at that moment was to find Beta Arnold and get himself chained in the dungeon. That was his ritual every full moon, but he couldn't bring himself to search for Arnold. All he could think about was Hannah and sinking his teeth into her neck to mark her as his. His hands trembled as he stood. Most of the staff were away. They were probably in hiding, knowing what day of the month it was. Beads of sweat piled on Sebastian's forehead, and his lip curled up in a snarl. The darkness that was closing around his vision was turning red as fury rose throughout him. Eric was growing lustful and impatient. Heat was rising in his lower abdomen, and his breathing was shaky. Sebastian stormed out of the dining hall in time for Hannah to make her way through the castle foyer. She paused when she saw him. Her eyes grew large with worry. She looked like she wanted to say something, but no words came out of her mouth. "She's home." Eric breathed, his tone low and husky. "Our chosen mate. We must have her for ourselves." Before he could help himself, he lunged toward her. She screamed out in terror as she ran into the darkened living quarters. The lights haven't been turned on, and the faint rays of the moonlight, shining through the window, fell on her fair and beautiful features, lightening her. He could see the pure terror in her eyes, but he didn't care. He grabbed onto her arm with force, tugging her to the couch. She struggled for a moment, trying to break free from his grip. Her scent filled him, and it was intoxicating. He wanted her. He needed her. He was hungry for her body, and his wolf wasn't taking no for an answer. He pushed her to the couch with force and climbed on her. His body weighed her down, and she struggled under him. He pressed himself firmly against her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached around the couch. He kissed her, biting down on her lip hard, drawing blood from her flesh. She winced out in pain, but he deepened the kiss, cutting off her air supply. She gasped under his kiss, her eyes pleading for him to stop. He continued to press into her. She sunk further into the couch, coughing as his body hurt her. Hannah reached the ground and quickly brought her purse into the air. slamming it into his face. The metal decoration on her bag dug into his head, and he felt blood trickling down his features within the mask. The mask almost came loose, but he adjusted it to keep it from falling off. During that time, Hannah wiggled her way out from under him. Her clothing was nearly ripped to shreds, but she managed to escape from the living quarters and run towards the front of the palace, towards the unguarded door. "Don't let her leave!" Eric roared. He ran for her. She was surprisingly fast, but he was faster. The fresh air outside hit him suddenly. The intensity of the moonlight only dug deeper into him as he ran through the gardens after her. The flowers were swaying in the breeze, bringing off a fluorescent fragrance. He saw Hannah's thin body, surrounded by the shadows of the night in the distance. Her hair and clothes were messy, yet her whole body was exuding a seductive scent that drove him crazier with each passing moment. Her fair and bare ankles were pierced with blood as she ran through the rose bushes, the blood beads and petals on her snow-white slender legs and shell-like toes. The rays made each mark on her body glisten, and it was even more seductive. He grew hungrier the closer he got to her. The quicker they ran, the more he started growing out of breath, but he continued chasing her slender and hasty shadow like the beast he was. Tears sprung from my eyes as I ran. He was getting closer to me, and I knew at that moment that this was it for me. I couldn't run any further. He was going to finally kill me. I sobbed as I reached the pool. My only hope was to jump and hope that the water soothes him enough to make him stop. I had no other option. I plunged into the cold oasis of the pool, the water soaking over my head and engulfing my body. I heard a plump as Sebastian dove into the water as well. Before I could resurface, he grabbed my arm and pulled me down with him. I struggled to break free from him. My lungs were screaming for a breath of air. My body trembled as he pushed me to the bottom of the pool, my back digging into the hard ground. His hardened exterior was pressed against me. My heart was beating rapidly in my chest, and I wanted to cry out for someone to help, but we were still under the surface. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him, and I could sense him all around me. The moon rose to the middle of the sky, and the rays beamed down into the water, reflecting off my features. He stilled for a moment as he stared around my face. At that moment, I thought I was going to pass out from lack of oxygen. But he seemed to be letting his guard down. His grip around me loosened as he leaned down and pressed his lips firmly against mine. For a moment, I thought he was calming down and that my torment was over. I managed to wiggle my way out from under him and swim to the surface before he realized what was happening. My head broke through the surface, and I coughed as air invaded my lungs and water escaped my mouth. I grabbed onto the edge of the pool to try and pull myself up, but he was behind me quickly. He grabbed my body and spun me around to face him. He pressed me hard against the edge of the pool, his hardened exterior digging into my trembling body. He grabbed onto the locks of my hair and pulled on it hard, revealing my slender neck. He kissed my neck hard as he ripped the rest of my clothing off, leaving me bare and vulnerable to him. I didn't realize he was also bare. He must have ripped his clothing off before he dove into the water. He presses his body firmly into me as I continued to reach for the edge of the pool, attempting to pull myself up. He released me enough so I could get out of the water. The rays of the moon fell on my body and lightened my features. His eyes traced over me, and I could see the hunger he was feeling. I was out of breath, and I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. I wasn't even sure I could stand up to run away. My body was cold and trembled uncontrollably as he reached for the edge of the pool and pulled himself out of the water. His mask, which must have become loose when I hit him with my bag, fell, and I heard it splash into the pool. The moonlight above his head fell over his entire face, and my eyes widened. If it wasn't for those beautiful, familiar eyes that I've come to know, I wouldn't have known it was him. He was rumored to be disfigured because of a war between the wolves and vampires. He wore a mask, never to be revealed because of his horrid face. But looking at the man before me, I couldn't believe the shockingly handsome figure that stared back at me. My heartbeat nearly froze and sat heavily in my chest as I took in his appearance. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was speechless, and I was too stunned to move. "Oh, my moon goddess," Nora breathed from within me. I swallowed hard as my features lit up. I felt heat washing over me. My entire body was red, and my breathing became harsh. I felt hot all over. This couldn't be the same violent wolf king that everyone feared. "We have entered the estrus period. We must have him. We can't hold back anymore." She was right. The heat was rising throughout my body, and I couldn't deny what was happening any longer. I stared into Sebastian's scarlet eyes. He knew it too. Hannah's POV. Your face," I stammered, staring up at his beautifully handsome face. I could feel the heat rising in my features and my heart pounding heavily against my chest. There was no doubt about it. I was going into the estrus period. The fear I once felt turned into lust. At that moment, I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't to run away. I wanted to be closer to him, to touch him. I needed to be near him. "He's amazing," Nora breathed. She could hardly contain herself any longer. She was about to lose control at any moment, and I feared that I wasn't going to be able to contain her much longer. I stopped struggling against him and allowed my body to go limp as he mounted on top of me. But just as soon as his eyes turned scarlet, they were turning back to normal. What was happening? He looked shocked for a moment as he felt around his face. There was panic crossing his expression. He pulled himself off me and turned back towards the pool to see his mask floating in the water. He grabbed it and quickly placed it over his face. I reached out to his arm to stop him, but he shoved my hand away from him, standing to his feet. "Wait," I breathed, trying to reach for him again, but he shoved me away again. "Don't touch me," he hissed. There was something in his voice I didn't recognize. It almost sounded like pain. I stared up at the rays of moonlight that were shining on us. His madness couldn't have been over yet. The full moon was still in place and stronger than ever. Then I remembered what he was saying about how my scent and saliva calmed him. Could that be the reason he seems calmer now? Just as I was going into heat? This wasn't fair. I wanted to reach for him again, but I feared he would snap if I tried anything more. "We need to get you home," he muttered. "I'm not ready to go home yet," I murmured in response. He refused to meet my eyes again. He grabbed his shirt that was laying on the ground beside us and draped it over my bare body. I had forgotten I was completely naked up until that point. "Please," I whispered. "I want this." I reached my hand up to touch his face, but he smacked it away with force, stunning me. I felt my heart weighing heavily in my chest as he stared down at his own trembling hands. Was he frightened? I couldn't tell what was happening to him. Sebastian, he had gone too far this time. He had known it, but he couldn't stop himself. The moon was affecting him and turning him mad. He needed her, and she resisted him. She ran from him, so he ran after her. Her scent was so intoxicating that he just needed her for himself. Remembering how her thin figure ran through the shadows of the rose bushes, slicing through the flesh of her ankles. His head was whirling. Then he watched her dive into the waters of the pool, her naked body glistening under the moon-kissed aquas. As they pulled themselves out of the water, his mask fell off. She looked at him with such anguish and horror that he stumbled backward and off her. She was breathing heavily and staring at him with intensity crossing her face. She saw him as such a freak that she wanted to touch his face. He wouldn't allow her to get that close to him, though. He shoved her away. She wanted to see his face again after he put the mask back on. He couldn't understand why she was suddenly so curious about the freak that lay underneath the plastic exterior. Her cheeks were growing redder with each passing moment. Her eyes were sparkling, something he couldn't understand, but soon he realizes she was going into heat. The thought disgusted him. Could she be enjoying the fact that he was so unbearable to look at? Did she like his disfigured face? No, that wasn't possible. She just wanted to make fun of it like all the others. She would soon be frightened of him and leave just as everyone has. "Please," she whispered, her voice growing husky. "I want this." She was lying to him. She had to have been lying to him. It wasn't fair. He slapped her outstretched hand away, which startled her. Her eyes grew large with fear, and then disappointment crossed her beautiful features. His heart tugged for a moment as he stared down at his own trembling hands. "What are you doing?" Eric hissed, trying to gain his control back. "This is our chance. Mark her as ours." No, Sebastian growled. Not like this. Not tonight. Eric was going to argue more, but Sebastian could feel him stilling inside of him. There was something wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach. They weren't alone. Someone's here, Eric hissed within him. I can feel a third presence. Panic set in as Sebastian looked around quickly. Has someone else seen him without his mask? They couldn't waste much more time. He grabbed his shirt that lay next to the pool and covered Hannah's bare body. She seemed stunned that he did such a thing, but he paid her no more attention. Without saying anything else to her, he scooped her into his arms. He ran through the yards at a quick speed. She held on to him tightly. He could see the slight fear in her eyes as they picked up speed. She held herself close to his body, burying her head in his chest. The scent of her hair invaded his nose, calming all his senses. He reached the front doors of the palace and barged in. Thankfully, nobody was around. They were all still in hiding in fear of the vicious Wolf King. On the night of the full moon, everyone dismisses themselves early and gets to safety, including Queen Magnolia. Sebastian made his way up the grand stairs and into his personal bathroom. He had a large tub that he often used to take ice baths. It helped calm him during his time of madness and insanity. He was hoping an ice bath would calm Hannah's estrus period as well. He put Hannah down near the tub, and she rested her head against the wall. Her cheeks were still flushed, and she was staring at him so intently that he felt uncomfortable. It was almost infuriating. She looked tired as well, probably from all the running around. "What are you doing?" she asked in a hushed tone as he filled the tub with ice from his freezer. "What does it look like I'm doing?" he muttered, annoyed at her question. He couldn't stop thinking about Hannah with the doctor in the photos. She was pressed up against him on his side and gazing up at him, giving him a smile that almost seemed foreign at that point. A jealous tug pulled at him. "You need to calm yourself down." She frowned and shook her head. "No, I need you," she murmured, grabbing at his arm to stop him from filling up the tub. He pulled away from her, refusing to meet her eyes. "Hannah," he said, his voice becoming a whisper. "Don't deny me, Sebastian," she complained. "I know you want me to. Why else would you chase me all night?" He said nothing in response, and she gazed up at him worriedly. "Or did you actually just want to kill me?" "Enough," he ordered. He was growing impatient. She silenced right away, bowing her head in shame as he stood to his feet. The tub had just finished filling with cold water. The ice was bobbing up and down. He again scooped Hannah into his arms and forcibly put her into the tub. She shivered and cried out as the water nearly froze her. Her features had gone pale, which to Sebastian was a step from being rosy, pink. It seemed she was calming down quickly from her heat, and now she was staring up at him with such despair. She held her bare body together with her thin arms and she continued to shiver. He couldn't watch this any longer. He needed to get out of there before his madness continued. The full moon wasn't over yet, and her saliva and scent could only hold him off for so long. He could already feel his desires and hunger returning to him. Eric was impatient and itching to come loose, despite how hard he was holding back. He stood to his feet and turned away from Hannah. He could feel her eyes burning into the back of his head as he made his way to the door. "I refuse to be used to satisfy your heat," he muttered. "Figure it out yourself." Once he left the bathroom, he paused as he heard screaming coming from the kitchen. "He's dead! Sebastian! Somebody help! He's dead!" He didn't recognize the voice, but his heart thudded violently against his chest at the shrilling panic that was coming from the kitchen on the floor below. He hadn't been near the kitchen all night, so whoever was dead, he knew it had nothing to do with him. He's been with Hannah anyways. It wasn't possible. He left Hannah alone in the bathroom. He wasn't sure if she could hear the screaming from where she was, but he worried that she would think it was him as well. He ran down the stairs where a few servants were gathering around the kitchen. The head chef looked pale, and he was stumbling away with his body trembling. He made eye contact with a few of the maids, and they also paled at the sight of the violent Wolf King on the night of the full moon. He could feel his madness returning to him slightly, but not enough for him to lose sight of what was happening. Hannah's scent and saliva still invaded him enough to keep him semi-calm. There was a young maid that stood in the center of the kitchen. She wasn't someone that Sebastian recognized, but there were always new maids that appeared whenever another one of them turned up dead. He guessed she was someone that his stepmother hired. She had tear-stained features, and her body was shaking violently. She knelt over the deceased body of a young servant boy that he did recognize from around the palace. He was a teen, not much older than the young girl. She must have known him well because she was crying over his dead body. She was shaking him, trying to wake him, to no prevail. "Please," she cried to the other servants. "Somebody help my brother." Her brother? "Scotty," she sobbed. "Please wake up, don't leave me." As Sebastian made his way into the kitchen, the servants began dispersing quickly. It was clear they were frightened of him, and he couldn't blame them. He wanted them all to run. Looking at their terrified expression was only making him grow angrier, and he could feel his madness returning, despite how hard he was holding off. Eric was growing impatient and wanted to shred these servants apart, limb by limb, but he held back for Hannah's sake. He knew if she saw him in that violent state, she would never smile at him the way she used to, the way she smiled at the doctor. He clenched his fists at the thought of it, trying to contain the jealousy he was feeling deep within himself. The young maid looked up at him, her eyes growing wide and alert. She had obviously heard stories of him, but probably didn't think they were real, until now. She stumbled away from the body, falling onto her backside. Her dark hair fell over her features, covering her face. "Please," she whispered. "Don't hurt me. I only just got here yesterday. My brother didn't deserve what happened to him." Her voice broke off as he rose his hand for her to silence. "Leave," he said to her. His tone was harsh. She shivered at his presence, but she stayed still. "Please," she said again through her tears and tightened jaw. "He needs help. He's dead," he hissed. "There's nothing more you can do for him." This only made her sob even harder. "Unless you want the same fate as your brother, I suggest you leave." She stared down at the deceased servant once more before struggling to pull herself to her feet. She held onto her body with her frail arms, trying to keep herself from shivering too violently, but she failed to do so. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, sniffling as she hurriedly ran towards the door. She looked back for only a moment before disappearing. Sebastian waited until he was alone in the kitchen before staring down at the young boy. He sighed. It was a shame that he had to die at such a young age. Messily done, too. His throat had been ripped open by a wolf. Blood was splattered against the floors, and some made their way across the walls. He had bite marks and scratch marks around his torso. It must have been a long and painful death. He knew he had to move the body and clean up the mess before word got around the kingdom about this. Before he had the chance at moving the body, the door of the kitchen swung open. He didn't need to turn to see who it was that was joining him. He could smell her right away, and Eric's fury was clue enough. "What have you done?" Queen Magnolia hissed, strolling into the kitchen. He knew that she must have had something to do with this. "You know I didn't do this," Sebastian said in return, without looking at her. "You really are a monster, Sebastian," Magnolia said, shaking her head with disapproval. "How many servants are you going to kill before you step down from the throne?" "I'm not stepping down," Sebastian muttered. She scoffed. "If you knew what was best for you, you'd step down. This behavior is unacceptable. The kingdom will uprise and remove you if they must." Sebastian snapped a look at her, fury flashing through his darkened eyes. "If you knew what was best for you, you'd speak to me appropriately and stop with these tricks," he snapped. Her eyes widened and she almost looked confused, but he could see through her act. "I don't know what tricks you are talking about," she said, waving him away, "but clean up this mess you've made. You may have the kingdom fooled, and you may have had my father fooled, but you will never have me fooled, Magnolia." She gave him a chilling laugh as she left the kitchen. "I want to rip her throat out," Eric hissed. "I want her dead." "Relax," Sebastian hissed to his wolf. "I refuse to be the monster she wants us to be." Eric said no more, but Sebastian could feel he wasn't happy with his response. He turned back to the young servant and cleaned up the crime scene. He buried his body in the backyard with the other deceased servants and finished cleaning the kitchen. He was glad that his madness didn't return him fully. Once he finished cleaning, he began to head upstairs. He too wanted to take an ice bath to calm himself down fully before returning to bed. He hoped that Hannah was sleeping soundly in their bed and didn't know what was happening in the kitchen. As he walked past the rooms to get to the bathroom, he heard the faint whispers of Hannah in Liam's bedroom. He paused at the door so he could listen to what she was saying. "I'm scared, Liam," she whispered. "I don't know what's happening to me and why I reacted in such a way. I don't know what he's thinking most of the time. Sometimes he's hot and other times he's cold. But I know he's dangerous, and it's only a matter of time before he kills me. My only worry is, what will happen to you if I die?" "You won't die, sis," Liam said. His tone was soft and weak-sounding. It was obvious he was getting sicker, and it was destroying Hannah to see him like this. She gasped, sounding surprised that he is responding. "I didn't know you were awake," she admitted, sniffling away her tears. "I'm sorry if I woke you." "I'm glad to be here with you," he whispered in a sleepy voice. "It's better than being alone at the hospital." Sebastian pulled himself away from the door, shaking his head with despair as he walked further down the hall and towards the bathroom. He paused a moment longer as he heard another familiar voice coming from the bathroom. He poked his head in, trying to be unseen, when he saw Hannah's handmaiden Caroline speaking to another maid, Valerie. "I'm telling you, Caroline." It was terrifying. She's so new and had no idea what the Wolf King was capable of doing. But when she saw what happened to her brother, she's insisting on leaving the palace permanently. She's terrified and won't stop crying. I don't know what to tell her. They were both cleaning the tub from when Hannah took her ice bath. They must have helped her out of the tub and got her dressed. Caroline stayed silent for a moment as she processed what was being said. She looked like something was weighing on her mind. "There's nothing I can do about it," Caroline finally said. "You can talk to her," Valerie insisted. "You have a calming personality. If anyone can talk to her, it's you." "I can't make her stay, Val," Caroline shot back. "What is wrong with you? You are always willing to help," Valerie huffed, folding her arms across her chest. Caroline rolled her eyes and shook her head. "Not this time," Caroline told her. "If she wants to leave, that's up to her and the royals. If they allow her to leave, then I think she should. I don't wish this on anyone." Valerie silenced and bowed her head slightly. She was giving up on trying to convince Caroline of anything. Sebastian had never heard this kind of discussion from servants before, and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. "Aren't you worried the Wolf King is going to finish the job and kill her too?" Valerie finally asked. They were siblings. Maybe killing one of them wasn't good enough. "He could kill any of us at any moment," Caroline muttered. She paused and met Valerie's eyes. "But I don't think it's him we have to worry about anyways." "What does that mean?" Valerie asked, her eyes widening. "It wasn't the Wolf King that killed that maid in the library," Caroline told her. "Luna Hannah found that out quickly." She paused again. "And he didn't kill this servant either." "What?" Valerie asked, her voice rising slightly. Caroline shushed her quickly, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Sebastian hid further into the hallway so she wouldn't spot him. As servants, they weren't able to use their wolves, so he wasn't worried that he would be able to be sensed. But if they looked hard enough, they would see him watching them. "I saw the queen leaving the kitchen after the servant was killed. She was covered in blood and went to clean up. She didn't see me, but I saw her," Caroline said. "Why would the queen kill a servant she hired?" Valerie asked, disbelief in her tone. "I don't know," Caroline shrugged, "but I think she's trying to pin it on the Wolf King." Sebastian's POV. What Sebastian heard wasn't surprising to him, but it still infuriated him just the same. He left the bathroom without making himself known to the gossiping maids. He clenched his fists to his sides, trying not to punch a hole in the wall that he so desperately wanted to do. A low growl made its way up his throat as he stormed down the stairs. The rest of the servants had disappeared for the rest of the night after the commotion in the kitchen. But he knew his stepmother would be nearby, probably watching his every move and waiting for him to fuck up again. But he wasn't going to give her what she wanted. "I'm going to tear her apart," Eric hissed as they stormed through the main foyer of the palace. Sebastian didn't bother calming him down this time because he also wanted to tear her apart. He knew that she has been trying to pin the blame for the deaths of the servants on him, but hearing the maids confirm his thoughts was enough for him to lose control. He could see darkness clouding his vision and his madness returning at full speed. No amount of Hannah's saliva or scent could calm him down at that moment. His head was pounding with this excruciating pain. The battle wounds that scarred his face, disfiguring him and making him hideous to the world, were burning as if he was set on fire. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He heard Magnolia screaming as he raced into the living quarters. Jack was with her as well, and instinctively, Sebastian had him pressed firmly against the wall. He was in the air, choking as Sebastian's long fingers were closed around his throat, cutting off his breathing. His body trembling as he tried to grasp for breath. Sebastian's fingers tightened around him, leaving red markings against his sick. "You're going to kill him, you monster!" Magnolia cried, attempting to stop him. He shoved her away with his other arm. She nearly stumbled to the ground. "I'm not the monster here," Sebastian hissed through his tightened jaw. "Tell me what you did." "I don't know what you are talking about," Magnolia cried. She was lying. "You obviously care nothing for your son's life. I have no problem snapping his neck and ending his pathetic life," Sebastian growled. "Tell me the truth. What do you want to hear?" Magnolia cried out, trying to stop him again. He once again shoved her away using his free arm and then punched Jack in the stomach. He coughed and poured from his mouth. His eyes were large. Sebastian could see the life draining from him. He was no match against the strength of the Wolf King, and Sebastian was going easy on him too. "All right, stop it," Magnolia hissed, fury rising through her reddened features. "I killed him, but I did it because he was trying to poison you." "Stop lying," Sebastian hissed, tightening his grip once again. "I'm not lying," Magnolia screamed. "Naomi put him up to it. She was trying to make you go mad so you'd kill Hannah." Sebastian's heart thudded violently against his chest, and his hand trembled for a moment. He pulled his gaze away from Jack to focus on Magnolia, trying to see if she was telling the truth or not. "What?" Sebastian asked through his gritted teeth. "She wants me to kill my Luna?" "Let him go, and I'll explain more," Magnolia said. Reluctantly, Sebastian released Jack. He fell to the ground, coughing and rubbing his throat in agony. His jaw tightened as he stared up at the Wolf King. Sebastian could see the hatred boiling on his features, but he didn't care. He paid no attention to his stepbrother, turning back to Magnolia with his eyes burning for more information. "She paid that servant to poison your food. I caught him yesterday," Magnolia said, keeping her eyes steady and locked on Sebastian's. "So she caught him poisoning his food yesterday? And said nothing about it until that moment? She also didn't do anything about it until that night. She was allowing for it to happen, and then still trying to pin his death on him." "I will kill her," Eric shouted from within. "No," he responded to his wolf. "Not yet. There's someone else we need to deal with first." He narrowed his eyes at Magnolia. "Try this shit again, and it will be your son that pays the price," he hissed. She said nothing as he turned and stormed out of the living quarters. As he left the palace, he allowed Eric to run loose. He transformed into his wolf self and stormed the kingdom. They ran through the forest at a quick pace, his large paws digging into the hardened dirt around them. The wind brushes through their razor-sharp fur, slicing through the bugs as he passes by. In his wolf form, his senses were heightened. He could hear, see, and smell for miles. He knew exactly where Naomi was located, and he knew exactly what she was doing at that moment. He was the largest wolf to roam the kingdom, and he was also the darkest. He could blend in with ease, but his scarlet eyes glowed, making him recognizable. As he picked up speed, he managed to knock trees down in his path. As he hit the ground, he made large echoing sounds that silenced the night critters. They feared for their lives and went into hiding almost immediately. Not that it would matter. He would be able to find them instantly if he was looking for them. But they weren't his current target. He was hungry for much more other than the flesh of basic forest critters. He broke through the forest and was greeted by the rays of the moonlight as it shined down on the village within the kingdom before him. There were only a few faint lights of the houses, and the flickering lights of the streets. As he ran, he made the earth tremble under each of his movements. It was like mini earthquakes he knew would bring the pack fear. The faint lighting of Alpha Stephen's home came into his view as he ran closer. As he saw the home, Eric picked up more speed, fury racing through him. Alpha Stephen wasn't home, but he knew Naomi would be. He barged through the front door, nearly ripping it off the hinges. Naomi screamed as she shot to her feet. Her eyes were large and alert. She stared at him like the monster he was. She practically tripped over her own feet as she tried to get away from him. He growled at her loudly as he swiped at her, cutting through the blouse she wore and slicing through the flesh of her shoulder. Blood poured from her as she grabbed her fresh wound in agony. "Ah!" she screamed out as tears sprang from her eyes. "Please," she begged. He pounced on top of her, sneering his hot breath in her face, growling deeply as he allowed her fear to overtake her. Her body shivered uncontrollably. Sebastian transformed back into himself, but he kept his hold on her, tightening his grip around her arms. "Next time, it will be your life," he hissed at her in a low and threatening tone. "I won't do it again," she cried. She was pleading for her life, which pleased him immensely. He released her and stood to his feet. He watched her cry below him, sobbing into her hands. "See that you don't," he muttered, turning away and storming out of the house. Amy sat in her room, listening to the commotion in the living room. Her mother was crying for a long while after the Wolf King had left. It was infuriating that he thought he had the upper hand. He was so protective of Hannah, and it was sickening for Amy to watch. Her life wasn't as great as she was making it out to be. Sure, she has nice clothing and goes to all the best events, not to mention is cared for by a dangerous beast, but she must live with the knowing fact that he could and probably will kill her at any moment. Once she dies, then everything she has will become Amy's. She worried that the Wolf King's threats against Naomi's life will keep Naomi from trying to end the life of Hannah. This was going to ruin everything if Amy didn't act fast. She waited a long while after King Sebastian left. Her mother had gone silent. She figured she had probably gone to bed. She slid out her bedroom window and made her way across the pack's village. Her best friend, Nancy, set up a meeting with a man that Amy had never met before. But Nancy swears that this man will do exactly as Amy requests for a fair enough price. Amy made her way through a dark alley. She waited until a dark figure stood before her. He wore a black trench coat and kept his face mainly covered. He was large, though, and towered over her, but he was also wide and made her feel oddly uncomfortable. "Are you Amy?" he asked, his voice low and threatening. It gave her a slight chill, but she didn't make her fear known to him. She stood her ground and nodded. "Yes," she answered, keeping her tone even. "Do you have the money?" he asked, sounding uninterested. She took a thick envelope out of her coat pocket and showed it to him. He grabbed it from her with force and looked inside to see the money wedged within. He cleared his throat and looked at her. "What is it you need me to do?" he asked. "My sister Hannah," she began. "She's the Wolf King's Luna. According to Nancy, she doesn't have work tomorrow. However, the Wolf King will be away at a business meeting with the alphas of the kingdom, which is the perfect opportunity for you to break into the palace to get to Hannah." "Okay," he urged. "That's when you attack her," Amy continued. "You want me to kill her?" he asked, sounding surprised but not fully against the idea. "No," Amy corrected. "I want you to rape her. Make it look like she's cheating." She paused with a sly smile. "If all goes as planned, the Wolf King will kill her himself." Hannah's POV. I woke up the next morning and Sebastian was gone. I knew he had some important meetings to take care of for most of the day, but there was so much I wanted to say to him. I wanted so badly to ask him about the scars on his face, or the lack of scars, I should say. I wasn't expecting to be able to see his face, and I certainly wasn't expecting his face to be as handsome as it was. It wasn't making any sense. Where did these rumors about the Wolf King being hideously disfigured come from? Nora was intoxicated by not only his scent, but by his appearance as well. I remembered a while back that Sebastian requested to mark me as his chosen mate after the full moon. I was made to believe he wanted to wait because he feared that I wouldn't survive this full moon. But now that it was the day after the full moon, I couldn't help but wonder when he planned on marking me. I think the moment we saw his face for the first time and Nora went straight into heat was the moment she was accepting him as our chosen mate as well. My skin felt tingly thinking about his fingers on mine. The ghost of his lips remained on my mouth, and I touched my fingers to it. I had to admit that I was in a lot of fear of the Wolf King, but there was something about him that I couldn't shake. Just the mere thought of him drove Nora nearly insane. When Sebastian put me in the ice bath last night, I thought my body was going to freeze death. He left me to fend for myself, saying that he wasn't going to help me with my estrus period, whatever that meant. As he opened the door, I heard the screaming coming from the floor below. A tremble shot through my body, wondering what could have happened to cause a commotion. I stayed where I was, though, afraid of angering Sebastian any more than he already was. I stayed frozen in the tub until Caroline found me. "Oh my goodness, Your Highness!" she gasped as she ran into the bathroom. I could only imagine how I must have looked to her. I knew the color in my skin had drained, and I was shivering violently in my skin. She grabbed a towel off the rack and ran over to me. I could hardly form words. She attempted to pull me out of the tub, but her lack of strength proved that task to be difficult. The servants weren't particularly strong. She ran from the bathroom, telling me to hold on as she disappeared. She returned only moments later with another maid that I recognized as Valerie. Her eyes widened as she saw me, and she froze at the doorway. "Help me get her out of the tub," Caroline ordered. I had never seen her take such charge before. Valerie snapped out of her trance and ran towards me. They each grabbed half of my body and pulled me from the ice water. My body nearly shriveled as I fell to the ground. I cried out as my body began thawing and the pain began setting in. Caroline wrapped the warm towel around my body and held me close, trying to keep me as warm as possible. Caroline turned to Valerie. Both of their eyes were large and alert. "While the Alpha King is preoccupied downstairs, run into their shared bedroom and grab her night clothing," Caroline ordered. Valerie did as she said instantly. I was silently impressed with Caroline. It was clear that Caroline had some sort of authority over some of the maids, or at least they respected and trusted her enough to do as she said. Valerie returned with my clothing, and together they dressed me. My body began warming up enough that I wasn't shivering as violently. "Are you okay, Your Majesty?" Caroline asked. Tears welled up in my eyes. How could Sebastian just leave me like that? Was he actually trying to kill me? "I think so," I murmured between my tears. "Did the Alpha King do this?" Caroline asked, keeping her tone low. I nodded once, too weak to form an actual sentence. Caroline fell silent for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. "It's odd," she breathed. I looked at her confused. "He typically takes ice baths to calm himself down during his madness. That, or he locks himself in his underground dungeon if he's able to. I wonder why he would make you take the ice bath instead, though." I didn't answer her. I wiped my tears on the back of my hand and sniffled softly. Caroline didn't press me for answers. Instead, she stood up and pulled me to my feet with her. "You should get some sleep, Your Majesty," she said gently, giving me a soft smile. I nodded to her and smiled my thanks to them both. I left the bathroom. I began heading towards the bedroom I shared with Sebastian, but I couldn't bring myself to enter. At least not right now. I turned towards Liam's room and went inside. I didn't stay with Liam all night, only for a little while before returning to my room. I was relieved that Sebastian wasn't there. I was hoping he had resolved what had happened on the floor before, as I thought about the screaming I heard while in the bathroom. I slept for the rest of the night. By the time I woke up, he was gone from the palace to resume his duties as the Wolf King. I made a mental note to speak with him later about his face. Today was my day off, which was much needed after the week I've had. They probably figured I would need the day off after the full moon. Caroline tapped on my bedroom door briefly before entering with a tray of food. She gave me a polite smile and curtsied as she walked in. "Good morning, Your Majesty," she said, sitting the tray of food on my lap as I sat up. I blinked at her groggily without saying anything. "How are you feeling?" "I think I'm okay," I told her. "Thank you for helping me last night, Caroline." She blushed and chuckled softly. "Of course," she said. "It's what I'm here for, to assist you." I smiled my thanks to her. "What happened last night?" I asked her. She frowned and met my eyes. "I mean with the screaming from downstairs. What was going on?" She was hesitant before answering. "Another servant turned up dead," she answered gravely. "He was young. It's a shame he had to die." I felt my heart thudding in my chest rapidly. Could Sebastian have killed him? That didn't make sense because he was chasing me around the yards most of the night. When would he have killed this servant? Perhaps before I returned home from work? "Who was screaming?" I asked. "It's not the first time the others have seen something like this happen." "His sister," she answered. I wasn't aware the king had siblings working at the palace. They were both new. She was brand new, though, just started a few days ago. I imagine it wasn't easy to see something like this, especially when it happened to be her brother, she said sadly. "Has Sebastian left for the morning?" I asked, changing the subject. Caroline nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. He should be returning this afternoon. Is there anything else you needed?" "No, thank you," I said to her. "Thank you for the breakfast." She nodded again before leaving the room. I wasn't sure what to do with myself for the rest of the day. I wanted to find that maid and tell her how deeply sorry I was for the loss of her brother, but I figured she probably needed some time to herself. I also wanted to ask Caroline if she thinks Sebastian was the one who killed him, but I also didn't want to unintentionally start any rumors. So I kept my mouth quiet and tried to keep to myself for the rest of the morning. I finished my breakfast and made sure that Liam had also had breakfast. He was growing sicker with each passing day, and I was watching him waste away before my eyes. It broke my heart knowing I couldn't do much more to help him. Thankfully, he had a doctor's visit this afternoon, and they would surely give him some more medicine to make him a little better. Once I finished tending to Liam, I went out into the gardens of the palace. The memory of running through the rose bushes invaded my mind as I rubbed my sore ankles. They were scabbed over by the thorns that pierced my flesh, and I grimaced at the thought. Despite that memory, though, the gardens were my favorite place in the palace. It was so peaceful and beautiful. Not to mention it smelled lovely and sent a calming sensation through my body. I sat there for a long while, allowing thoughts to invade my mind before heading back inside. I went into the living quarters and sat on the couch with a book. Most of the servants were hard at work around the palace and didn't bother me. I wasn't sure where Queen Magnolia and Jack were, though. They rarely left the palace grounds, so I knew they were lurking around somewhere. I was startled at the small spot of blood that seemed to be smeared against the wall in the living quarters, and another one staining the floor just below it. I frowned, narrowing my eyes at the blood, wondering who it was and how it got there. From what I was told, the servant was found dead in the kitchen, so it couldn't have been his. Before I could stand up to analyze it any further, I was startled by a sound coming from the window across the living quarters. Crash! Hannah's POV. I stood quickly as shards of glass broke through the window and scattered across the ground. A figure climbed his way through the window. He was a large man that wore a dark trench coat that covered most of his face. He was a large-built man that towered over me. I could smell the liquor radiating off his body almost right away, and the stench of him made me nearly gag. My heart beat against my chest violently, and my body trembled uncontrollably as I took a step away from him. He stood near the window for a long while, staring at me even though I couldn't see his face. "He has a dangerous aura," Nora breathed fiercely. "I don't recognize him." She didn't need to tell me that in order or me to know that he was a dangerous man. I could feel it. There was something off about him, and worry started to build up inside of me. "Who are you?" I demanded to know. Without saying anything, he removed his hood. I didn't recognize him at all, but his eyes were so dark they were practically black. There was a darkness inside of him that sent a chill down my spine. His hair was long and dark as well. He tucked a stray streak of hair behind his ear before smiling, but the smile didn't meet his eyes. "Who sent you?" I asked him, trying to keep my tone even. He scoffed, but he didn't answer me. Before I could grasp what was happening, he lunged toward me. I screamed out, hoping that someone would hear me calling for help, but no one came into the living quarters. It was like the walls were now soundproof. He grabbed me with force, pulling my body close to him. I gagged at the strong stench of alcohol on his breath as he leaned closer to me and pressed his lips firmly against mine. I struggled to pull away from him, but he was too strong and kept me locked in place. I felt the moistness of his tongue invading my mouth, exploring me curiously and hungrily. I coughed as I tried to maintain my breath, but it was difficult to breathe as he held me tighter. My body felt like it was going to snap at any moment. He pressed even firmly into me, and I fell onto the couch with him on top of me. I managed to pull my face away, so he was no longer kissing my mouth, but kissing trails down the nape of my neck. His fingers trailed up the sides of my body, cupping the seams of my gown. I felt it begin to tear away at his touch, and I struggled even harder against him. I attempted to kick him, but his legs were locked around mine. "Please," I begged as his mouth made its way against mine again. He pulled away and kissed my chest firmly. He began biting at my shoulder blade. I was worried he was going to leave a mark on my skin. If he marked me, then what would happen? "I can't transform," Nora complained. "He's too strong." Who was this man? What did he want from me? How did he manage to get past the guards and enter the palace? I felt tears burning in my eyes as more of my gown began ripping away. I was nearly bare. I was vulnerable to him. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Just as I screamed out again, the door of the living quarters burst open. It startled this man because he released me suddenly and turned in time to see Sebastian running towards us. Fury was clear in his eyes as he stared at this man. He didn't waste much time. Sebastian pulled the man off me with one hand. He threw him to the ground, and the darkness in the man's eyes was turning into a light brown as fear overtook him. He opened his mouth to say something, but Sebastian didn't give him the chance. Without saying anything, he punched him in the head, nearly knocking him unconscious. Blood splattered across the ground, and some made its way to the wall. "Who sent you?" Sebastian hissed, grabbing the man and pulling him off the ground. The man weakly opened his eyes, his body trembling as he was facing the Wolf King. "I don't know her name," the man stammered. "She paid me to come here and have my way with the Luna Queen." "Amy," Nora said, mimicking my thoughts. It had to have been Amy, or someone in my family. "You will leave here, and you will never return to this kingdom again. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you are exiled. Don't make me regret not killing you," Sebastian hissed, releasing the man. He fell to the ground in a puddle of his blood. He scrambled to his feet, still trembling violently as he found his way to the door. He didn't look back as he ran for safety. I was amazed that Sebastian didn't kill him. I grabbed the ripped fabrics of my gown and attempted to cover myself. I stayed there for a long while as Sebastian finished cleaning the living room. He didn't tell me where he was bringing the body, but I assumed it was where he brought all the others. I held my knees close to my chest and buried my face in my lap, trying not to sob too loudly. I couldn't believe something like this had happened. If I had to put money on who sent this man, I would put money on my family. "Amy," Nora muttered in agreement. Would she really stoop this low? Who am I kidding? Of course she would. She wanted to get rid of me for whatever reason. She had the chance of marrying the Alpha King, and she didn't take it. They made me marry him, so why was she acting like this now? It didn't make any sense to me. "Are you okay?" Sebastian surprised me by asking as he returned to the living room. He had changed clothing, and he no longer had blood staining his hands. I wiped the tears from my eyes and nodded, trying not to show the fear lingering in my eyes. "How did you know to come home?" I asked. I realized it was a little too early for him to be home. He was supposed to be gone for most of the day. It was hardly the afternoon. He seemed hesitant for a moment. "I could feel you," he said, meeting my eyes. "I could sense something was wrong, so I came home." I wasn't sure what to say in response. I bowed my head in defeat as he came closer to me. He scooped me into his arms before I could protest and held me close to him for a moment. I breathed in his scent and instantly felt my body relaxing. I rested my head against him as he brought me through the main foyer of the palace and up the stairs to the bathroom. As we got into the bathroom, I feared he was going to make me take another ice bath and I struggled for a moment for him to release me. He surprisingly released me right away and attempted to cover my naked body with his hands. "Stop," he muttered, rolling his eyes as he turned on the bath. I saw the hot steam of the water, and I relaxed again, relieved that it was a normal bath this time. He helped me into the tub and allowed me to bathe. He grabbed me a fresh gown and helped me get dressed once I was done in the tub. We were silent for most of the time as we're trying to process what had just happened. I stared up at the masked man before me, reaching out to touch the outer core of his mask. He flinched for a moment and recoiled away from me before I had the chance to remove his mask. "Why won't you let me see?" I found myself asking him. He didn't respond, so I asked again. "I saw you last night at the pool. I saw your face. Why won't you let me see you again?" "That was never meant to happen," he growled. "But it did," I told him. "I saw your face, your handsome face." "What do you take me for?" he snapped, shooting an icy gaze in my direction. I flinched at his tone, afraid that I had set him off again. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" "No," I whispered. "Of course not." "Then why do you insist on making a mockery of me?" he hissed. "I'm not your plaything to use for your desires." "I never said you were," I said in return, trying to keep my tone even. "You sit here and make fun of my face and expect me to obey your wishes and allow it to continue?" He shouted. "I wasn't making fun of your face," I told him that I was growing offended by his accusations. "I wouldn't," he scoffed and turned away from me. "For a minute you had me fooled, but I see that you aren't any different than the rest of them." "Sebastian," I tried to say to him, reaching toward him. He slapped my hand away instantly, and I winced at the sting. "Don't touch me," he muttered, stomping towards the door. "Go gossip with your maid about how hideous you think I am. That's what you all talk about, isn't it?" He slammed the door behind me, leaving me alone in the bathroom and dumbfounded, Hannah's POV. Every ounce of my body was screaming. I wanted to cry. I thought back to the previous night when that stranger's disgusting hands were all over me. The way he smelled lingered in my nose for the rest of the night. The ghost of his fingers pressed against me stained my skin. I took a long shower after Sebastian had saved me. Regardless of how hard I scrubbed, I never felt clean enough. I felt damaged and gross all over. Sebastian looked so angry as he tore through that man's skin. The rancid scent of that man's blood and guts soaking into the floorboards remained in the living quarters. A small knock sounded on the door, and I lifted my head off the pillow to see who it was. Caroline stood at the door, and she stared at me with concern lingering in her eyes. "Alpha King wanted me to bring you to the wardrobe room, Your Majesty," Caroline said. I rose my eyebrows. "Wardrobe room?" I asked her. I wasn't sure if I'd been in that room yet. I stared down at my pajamas and frowned. "Yes, it's where the royals get their clothes fit for big events," she told me. "They have their designer, Erica, waiting for you." I dragged myself out of bed and followed her out of the bedroom. We walked silently down the hallway and down the grand stairs. As we entered the room, it opened up into a lit-up and huge space. I felt like I was backstage in a movie or something. There were flashy lights everywhere. There was a makeup station with a big vanity on one side of the room, and a giant mirror with big lights surrounding it on the other side of the room. A woman stood in the center of the room, nearby a table with fabrics of a gown gently placed on top. She was analyzing the different gowns and making notes in a notebook. She was a tall and thin-figured woman with long dark hair and big maroon glasses. She looked around the age of the queen, and she looked extremely serious and intimidating. I wondered why I had never met her before. "What's this about?" I asked before Caroline could leave. "There's a celebrity ball tonight," she answered with a faint smile. "You are expected to attend it with Alpha King." My eyes widened in shock. A ball? I don't think I had ever attended a ball before. I wasn't even sure how to properly act at a ball. Erica put her notebook down as we entered the room. She was frowning at me for a long while. She was assessing my every move and every function of my body. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but telling from her face, she looked disappointed. She sighed after a few moments and motioned for me to come closer. "This just won't do," she said, staring at my hair. I sheepishly brushed my fingers through my hair. I never found anything wrong with it, but I suppose it was messy from the bed. The brown of my hair was also noticeably paling a little bit and losing volume. She started by measuring my body and taking down more notes. Then she added fabrics to my dress, and I felt my face redden. Was she insinuating I was fat? I wanted to ask, but there was a part of me that found her intimidating. She started sewing together parts of the dress. She worked quickly and efficiently. Soon she was placing the dress around my body and continued to sew it on me. I felt the dress tighten around me, nearly cutting off my air supply. I could hardly move as she tightened the dress a little more. Once she finished, she pulled back and stared around my body for a moment with a pleasing smile. Then she stared at my face and my hair and grimaced with annoyance. I wanted to say something again, but chose to keep quiet. I turned to look at the dress in the mirror. I nearly gasped in awe. I felt like I was a genuine princess. This type of elegant dress felt almost awkward to me. I was hardly qualified to wear the clothing from that boutique store in the city that Sebastian bought for me, let alone a dress of this statue. However, it didn't compare to my wedding dress, so I guess I shouldn't feel too awkward. But the dress was a deep purple and brought out all my curves. It was strapless and rested tastefully on my chest, tightening around my torso but expanding around my waist, falling to the ground in delicate fabrics around my feet. Erica grabbed my arm and helped me over to the hair and makeup station, where she had me sitting. I could hardly bend, but I did my best to appease her. She started doing my hair instantly, brushing it out, straightening, curling, and then finally pinning it back so it would run down my back and drape over my shoulders, yet be out of my face as well. She kept a couple of curly strands to dangle down my features to complement my appearance, though. She pinned it back in a dark purple barrette which matched the gown, and the barrette had a light purple flower attached to it. She started doing my makeup roughly after my hair. She kept my makeup light, only to amplify my already brightened features. It didn't take long to do my makeup. Once she finished, she pulled back and gave me another look. "Much better," she muttered, walking away from the makeup station. "Well, wait," I said, calling after her as she started packing up her stuff. "Where are you going?" I asked. "My job is done," she muttered. "I'm leaving." She left without another word. I thought Sebastian was going to have me accompany him to the ball, but instead, he sent his driver Louis to pick me up from the palace and meet him at the ball. I felt awkward and a little embarrassed. I wondered why he didn't want to be seen showing up there together. He had some business to take care of early this evening, Louis explained as I slid into the back of his car. "There's always some kind of business," I muttered. "The Alpha King is a busy man, Your Majesty," Louis responded as he sped away from the palace. Sebastian was waiting for me as we arrived. I felt a sudden relief upon seeing him. He wore a dark suit and tie with, of course, his mask firmly in place. Regardless of his mask, though, he still looks as handsome as ever. It made my stomach leap in my chest excitedly. He offered me his arm to take and guided me through the ballroom. Everyone was wearing elegant clothing. There was classical music playing, and women and men were dancing all around the room. Upon entering, I could smell the delicious foods baking from the kitchen, ready to serve. I was surprised that he wanted to dance. I didn't take him as much of a dancer. I didn't know how to dance well, but I enjoyed the peacefulness of the music. He held me close in his arms and twirled me around delicately, allowing my dress to spin around freely. He wrapped an arm firmly around my waist, and I wrapped an arm gently around his neck as we continued dancing with the crowd around us. I could see that everyone's eyes were on us. It was hard to read his expression through his mask, but I knew Nora's mind was whirling. There was something about him that had her in such a trance, and it sent a warmth through my insides. It was hard to believe that this was the same man that yelled at me the night before. Just before I could say anything to him, I heard a voice cutting through the ballroom. "Sebastian?" A loud and unfamiliar female voice. There were soft gasps from those around us. We froze. I was unsure who would call Sebastian by his given name with such informality. He looked more curious than angry, and his eyes widened as he saw the woman that stood before us. "Emily?" Hannah's POV. Everybody knew about the story of Sebastian and Emily. I wasn't sure if she was before or after Sebastian's late Luna, though, but I knew that Emily and Sebastian grew up together, and later in life they fell in love. However, she left him for an unknown reason, never to be heard from again. Until now. This would have been easier if she was hard to look at, but as she stood before us, I couldn't help but find her stunning. She had thick and curly blonde hair that went down her back, ending at her waistline. Her eyes were bright green like emeralds with long and dark lashes. She had rosy cheeks which matched the rosy tint of the tip of her nose and complementing her cherry lips. "It's been a really long time," she said. She didn't even look at me. It was like I wasn't even there. He said nothing to her. He just stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. I'm sure it must have been weird seeing her again after all these years. I watched as Emily wrapped her arms around Sebastian's neck and pulled herself close to him. I tensed my entire body watching her brush her lips across the nape of his neck and greeted him like I didn't exist. I pressed my lips together firmly, trying to contain myself and calm Nora down. Sebastian kept his hands to his sides and continued to say nothing. "We have so much to catch up on," she whispered against his ear. Sebastian finally found my eyes and held them steady for a moment. I shook my head with disgust as I stared at the two of them. He looked like he wanted to say something to me. I could tell he was uncomfortable, as was I. "I missed you," she whispered softer, pressing her lips firmly and intimately against his cheek. At that moment, it looked like Sebastian was about to say something to either her or me, and maybe he would have if I didn't say something first. "Excuse me, I don't believe we've met," I said, keeping my tone even. I was impressed with myself for sounding confident. Emily finally pulled herself away from Sebastian and looked at me, her smile plastered on her lips. "Emily," she introduced. "And you are?" "Sebastian's Luna," I said, shaking her hand and keeping my eyes steadily on hers. She almost looked like she wanted to laugh until she realized I wasn't laughing. "Emily is an old friend of mine," Sebastian said, straightening his stance as he kept his eyes locked on mine. "Sebastian, that's not all we were," she purred, giving him a wink. I sucked in a sharp breath and held it in, feeling my features heating up. "We were also old lovers," she added. I took a step toward Emily until we were only inches from one another. "I don't know who you think you are, but Sebastian isn't yours anymore. Stay away from my husband," I hissed. Emily was at a loss of words, as was he. I turned away from Emily to face Sebastian, peering up at him with a confident smirk. I could see the amusement dancing in his eyes as he offered me his arm. I wrapped my arm through his and allowed him to guide me away. As they got their distance from Emily, I swear I heard Sebastian speaking under his breath. Impressive. Emily's POV. This was going to be a lot harder than she thought. When Naomi reached out to her, she mentioned that Hannah was soft-spoken and easy to push around. But the Hannah that she just met wasn't taking anyone's bullshit. She seemed to be able to see right through Emily quickly, but that didn't matter because she didn't need to get to Hannah directly. What she needed and wanted was to get to Sebastian. Considering they were old friends and he trusted her, that was going to be a lot easier. If she got to Sebastian, she would have no problem getting to Hannah after that. Naomi was clear when she said she wanted Hannah out of the picture, and Emily couldn't blame her. She didn't want Hannah with Sebastian anyways. She didn't want anyone with Sebastian. Sebastian and Emily grew up together, and she remembered how handsome he was as they aged. He was always so gentle and caring towards others, very generous and nicely built. It was no wonder she's loved him from the moment they were children until they came of age. A year before he left for war, he asked her to move in with him in the palace. He wanted her to be his Luna and marry him. At the time, the idea of being a Luna frightened her. She moved in with him but told him that she wanted to wait a little while before they got married, and she took on the responsibility of being his Luna. He agreed to that. Then he had to go to war, and once he returned, he had a mask covering his face. He wouldn't tell her what happened exactly during the war that caused him to be so injured that he needed a mask. She feared for the worst. She could only imagine the disfigured beast that lay beneath that mask. The thought of scarring so bad that it turned Sebastian into a hideous monster terrified her. The scarring wasn't the only thing that frightened her, though. His behavior had changed as well. He was no longer gentle and caring, but rough and mean. He had a temper, and he seemed bothered by almost everything. As much as she knew that he loved her, it wasn't enough. So, she told him that she was leaving to study abroad, and she wasn't returning. He looked crushed when she left, but she had to care for herself above anything. She never wanted to hurt him, and she never wanted to leave him, but her fear of him was greater than her love for him. Sitting at the airport, she waited for her flight alone. She sat beside these girls who enjoyed gossiping. They seemed to be going on a short vacation. Emily had recognized the girls from around the kingdom, but she never directly spoke to them. However, from the glances they were giving her, it seems as if they knew all about her. She decided to tune in to what they were discussing. "She's the Luna of the Alpha King," one of them whispered. The other girl widened her eyes and stared over at Emily, who was pretending to read her book. "How do you know they were married?" "There was never mention of a wedding," she said in return. "She lives in the palace," the first girl stated. "Obviously they are married." "I wonder where the Alpha King is," the second girl said, looking around eagerly. "Surely she isn't traveling alone." "He must be around somewhere. I wonder if we'll get to meet him. Oh, moon goddess, he's so good-looking. I don't even know what I would say if we did meet him," she chuckled. Emily, at that point, closed her book and focused on the girls. They both looked startled as Emily made direct eye contact with them. "You mean the Wolf King that is so hideously disfigured that even he hates himself?" Emily asked, keeping her tone smooth. Both girls were shocked at her words and looked at one another for reassurance. "Excuse us?" the first girl asked with wide eyes. Emily rolled her eyes. "Your Alpha is nothing more than a vicious wolf king that preys off the weak and kills for fun. He was so disfigured he wears a mask to cover his scarring. His once handsome face is now the face of a monster, a beast," Emily sneered, folding her arms across her chest. "That can't be true," the second girl said in a whisper. They were both trembling in their skin. "How did this happen?" "Ask him yourself," Emily said with a grin. "If you dare, I assure you it won't be pleasant for you. If you value your lives, you'll stay far away from him." She paused, and warned the others around the kingdom to do the same. "Is this why you are leaving?" the first girl asked hesitantly. Emily scoffed and leaned back in her seat. "I wouldn't dare be in the same kingdom as someone of that stature. A wolfman like that will gain a reputation quickly around here," Emily told them. They both appeared frightened, which pleased her. "Now they won't go near Sebastian. If all goes well, no other female will go near him." The girls took out their phones and started typing away. It was only a matter of time before word got around about how dangerous the Wolf King was. Emily had to hide the smile that was appearing on her lips. Thankfully, her flight number was being called over the loudspeaker. She stood up and grabbed her belongings. The girls didn't notice she was leaving until she spoke again. "By the way, that woman you see living in his palace, the one that you called his Luna, she's dead," Emily told them dryly. They both looked up at her with wide and panicked eyes. That monster killed her. Hannah's POV. "I thought that would be my last encounter with Sebastian's ex-girlfriend, Emily. She kept giving me side eyes for the rest of the night. I was thankful that Sebastian didn't go back over there to speak with her." The look on Sebastian's face was something I have never seen before. It was like he had seen a ghost. I couldn't explain the rage I was feeling, but Nora wanted to rip that woman's throat out. The way she looked at him and touched him, the way she pressed her body against his and kissed his face. She kissed the area of skin that was revealed through his mask, and I clenched my fists as I watched their interaction. The worst of it was that he didn't pull away from her or say anything. He let her do it. He didn't mention her for the rest of the night, and I didn't bring her up. I just let my rage simmer for a moment longer before deciding to let it go. The next morning, Sebastian seemed back to his normal self. He didn't seem outraged and manic due to the full moon, which came as a relief to me. I still wanted to know about the scars under the mask, but I chose not to say anything for fear that it would set him off again. We ate breakfast as we normally do, with minimal discussion. Caroline came into the dining hall with a weird expression that I had never seen before. "What's wrong?" I asked her as she approached me. She was holding a newspaper in her hands, and she looked nervous. She stared over at Sebastian briefly before handing me the paper. It was an official statement made by Emily herself. She must have connections in the media to get a statement out that quickly. It read, "It's from my understanding that the newest Luna Queen, Hannah, is only after my beloved Sebastian for his money. It's the only thing that makes sense as to why she would want to marry such a vicious beast. She's a gold digger, and I won't stand idly by as I watch her take everything away from my ex-husband. She's plotting to kill him, and I'm glad I returned just in time to stop her." Her ex-husband? Was Emily really once married to Sebastian? I looked up at him from across the table, and he was watching me curiously. He was wondering what it was that got me so distraught, and I could hardly speak to answer his confused gaze. He stood up without saying anything to me and strolled closer. I felt every fiber of my being pulsating with each step he took closer to me. His eyes were darkening, and for a moment I feared he was going to lose control again. I swallowed hard as he ripped the paper from my grip, nearly cutting my fingers in the process. He scanned the paper quickly before slamming it down on the table. Both Caroline and I flinched at the forcefulness. He said nothing as he left the kitchen. Sebastian's POV. The media had a way of twisting words around, and he knew there could have been the possibility of that happening in this situation. He couldn't imagine the only reason Emily would return is to bash Hannah. But the hurt look on Hannah's face when she read the article written about her angered Eric. "How dare they make up such bullshit?" Eric hissed. "Did you see the look on Hannah's face? She was hurting. That's not okay." "Is it bullshit?" Sebastian asked, thinking more about it. Hannah had asked Magnolia for money in the past. "You don't know what you are saying," Eric growled. "We need to make this right, for our chosen mate." They haven't even marked her yet. She was hardly their mate. But he knew that didn't matter to Eric. He had already chosen Hannah the moment he saw her. Sebastian called Emily and told her that they needed to speak privately. He kept his tone even when speaking to her and tried not to allow his emotions to get the better of him. She was nothing more than an old friend that has come back from the past. They met at a small cafe in the kingdom, a place he knew Emily had loved growing up. She sat across from him at the table, and she looked worn out, maybe even a little sad despite the small smile she kept placed on her lips. "I know why you wanted to see me," she began as she took a sip of her espresso. "It's because of the statement released to the media." He stayed silent as he stared at her. He kept a calm composure, and his beverage laid untouched. He wasn't much of a coffee drinker because it made his madness that much worse. "Explain to me why you said what you did," he ordered, keeping his tone low. He was ignoring the wary and shocked looks he was getting from those around him. It wasn't often that pack members around the kingdom spotted their king in an ordinary cafe. "I guess I was surprised when the media approached me. They heard of my return and were shocked I was alive," she told him. Taking another sip of her drink, she swished the beverage in her cup for a little bit before placing the cup back down on the table to gaze up at him. "I didn't mean any harm, and I didn't think the story would be released as it did." "What did you say to them, Emily?" Sebastian asked. Even he could hear the impatience in his tone. "They asked me what I thought of your new marriage, and I told them the truth. I don't know her that well, but it seems the marriage was sudden. I worry that she isn't after your best interest," she admitted. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. You need to contact them and tell them what you said wasn't the truth," Sebastian ordered. She nodded quickly. "Of course," she said softly. "Again, I am so sorry. Please apologize to Hannah for me as well. I meant her no harm." They sat silently for a long while. Sebastian was ready to stand and leave without giving her another look, but her words made him sit back down instantly. "I'm dying," she said in a breath. He said nothing. He stared at her blankly, unsure if he heard her correctly. "I have this terminal illness, and I'm not sure how much longer I have." "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his tone sounding interested, but he sat frozen from her words. He stared across the table at the woman that he had once loved as a child and thought of as a little sister growing up. She was there for him from the day his mother died and has been there for him through a lot more. He would be lying if he didn't still think of her often as the little sister she was, and he felt he owed it to her to listen to what she had to say. Because I couldn't keep it to myself any longer, she told him. I never wanted to burden you with the possibility of my death. I thought I was getting better for a while, but it came back. He was silent for a little longer. You know we have the best doctors in the kingdom, he reminded her, eyeing her carefully. Feel free to check in at the hospital in the morning. He went to stand to leave again, but she stood up quickly, staring at him with such dismay. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she bit the bottom of her lip to keep herself from sobbing. Please don't let me go through this alone, Sebastian, she pleaded. I'm so scared. Hannah's POV. I don't understand why you need to be at the hospital with her, I said, trying not to sound annoyed as Sebastian was leaving for the day. I can't let her go through something like this alone, Sebastian said, keeping his tone even and his eyes away from me. I couldn't help but feel like there was something he wasn't telling me. A knot was forming in my throat, and I swallowed it down into my stomach. Are you forgetting the statement she made about me to the media? I asked, folding my arms across my chest. He turned to finally look at me, his eyes revealing something I didn't understand. The media twists words around. She didn't mean it the way it sounded, he told me, trying to keep his tone calm. She still said it, I muttered. Hannah, he warned. I stopped speaking immediately, worried that if I said anything more, it would set him off. He eventually sighed and met my eyes. There's a lot you don't know, he told me. I need you to respect the fact that I need to be there for her, just as she was there for me. I didn't know what that meant, but I felt uneasy. However, I supposed it didn't matter. He would be spending time with her at the hospital, where I worked. I would be seeing them often anyway, and when he's not at the hospital, he would be at home with me. But there was still a huge part of me that didn't trust her. I felt like she was doing this on purpose, trying to drive us further apart. But I couldn't express that to him. I had a feeling he wasn't going to want to listen to me regardless. I didn't argue anymore with him. I watched as he left the palace. I went into work a few hours later and I found out that Nancy was going to be her doctor, which makes me even more suspicious of the situation. As I entered the hospital, I immediately got the scent of Sebastian and went straight in his direction. If I could just see him for a moment before I started my shift, maybe I wouldn't be as worried. Unfortunately, before I reached her room, Nancy stopped me. Stay away from my patient's room, Nancy barked, folding her arms across her chest and peering at me with her small beady eyes. You're treating Emily? I asked, my mouth gaping. A grin spread across her lips, and she scoffed. Problem with that? She asked, tilting her head to the side. Last I checked, you were at capacity, and I had a free spot. I ignored her and looked over at the closed door to Emily's room. My husband is in there. I'd like to see him, I told her. She narrowed her eyes at me. You can see him later, she barked. I have orders from my patient to not let you in her room. I shouldn't have been surprised by that, but a jab of hurt struck my chest. Why would Sebastian allow something like that? Did he know she was trying to keep me away from him like this? I could feel Nora's fury from within me. It's been days since Emily randomly showed up and started staying at the hospital. I felt like I haven't genuinely spoken to Sebastian since she showed up, and Nora was going insane over it. I couldn't help the nasty feeling that was forming in the pit of my stomach. You seem distracted lately, Dr. Davis said after I made my last rounds for the evening. I was finishing some notes at my desk, and I looked up to see him standing over me and staring at me with concern lingering in his eyes. I'm sorry, I told him. Just a lot going on. The perfume didn't work? He asked. I looked at him confused for a moment, not sure what he was talking about. The perfume to calm the Wolf King's madness, he reminded me. Oh, right. It worked well, I lied. I wasn't going to tell him what happened since I got the perfume. It wasn't his business, and I didn't really want to talk about it. Thanks for helping me research that day. He looked relieved. I'm glad that it went well, he said, brushing his fingers through his hair. He looked tired. I couldn't blame him. Perhaps we could go to dinner this evening to celebrate? I frowned. I didn't think that was going to be a good idea. Sebastian would have a fit if he found out that I went to dinner with another man. But then again, I was hungry, and it's not like he would even notice that I was gone. He spent so much time with Emily these last few days anyway. I reluctantly agreed. It was only dinner after all. I dressed in a beautiful silver evening gown and kept my hair down and around my shoulders. The clothing wasn't too formal to me, but it wasn't too casual either. I had Louis drive me to the Italian restaurant where Dr. Davis met me. He was a handsome man, that much I noticed. However, he was certainly not as handsome as Sebastian. Nobody could compare to Sebastian. We talked a lot about work, and I tried to keep the conversation to a minimum. My mind just wasn't in the evening, though, and I just wanted to go home. I think he could tell that I wasn't enjoying myself because we cut the evening short, and he allowed me to return home early. As I got home, I wasn't expecting Sebastian to be waiting for me in the foyer. I felt the color draining from my features as he stood over me, his eyes turning scarlet. He looked furious, like he was about to rip my head off my shoulders. I took an unsteady step away from him before he lunged and attacked me again. He grabbed onto my arms with force and pulled me into the living quarters. It was empty, and I thought he was going to rip me apart. "Wait, stop," I pleaded. He released my arm and turned to me, his lip curling up in fury and his eyes darkening. "You constantly try to make a fool of me, Hannah," he hissed. "Every time I turn around, you are doing something stupid." "I didn't do anything," I told him, tears welling up in my eyes. "It was just dinner." "Just dinner?" he growled. "How do you think I felt when I heard my Luna was on a date with another man?" "It wasn't a date," I protested, turning away from him. He grabbed my shoulder with force and yanked me so I would face him once again. "Don't mock me," he growled. "I'm not mocking you," I told him firmly. "I didn't think you'd notice or even care that I left. You've been so wrapped up with Emily lately." "I'm not dating her. Emily is ill," he told me. "I need to be there for her." I wanted to argue more, but I didn't have the energy. I just wanted to go to bed and forget this whole evening existed. But before I could walk away, he grabbed my shoulders again and pressed his lips firmly against mine. His lips softened upon contact, and his scent filled my nose, calming all my senses. I thought about the bite marks that formed on my lips a few weeks ago, and I never actually asked him where they came from. I felt my cheeks reddening at the thought, and I pulled away instinctively. "Why do you only kiss me when I sleep?" I asked, peering up at him. He didn't seem fazed by my question, but his eyes darkened with curiosity as he tilted his head and looked down at me. "Would you have kissed me if you were awake?" Hannah's POV. It was a question I never expected him to ask me, and my face reddened. He didn't say anything more. He released me and walked away from the living quarters. I wrapped my arms around my body and held myself close for a little while. Sitting on the couch, I thought about my evening with Dr. Davis. He was a sweet man, but I felt guilty for going out with him, knowing that Sebastian would be angry with me. Maybe part of me wanted to make him angry. He's been spending so much time with his ex. Perhaps subconsciously, I wanted him to feel as I felt. There's still so much to Sebastian that I wasn't aware of. I wanted to know more about him and the madness he has come to know. It's clear that something had happened to him when he went to battle the vampires all those years ago. There had to be a cure for his madness to finally live a normal and happy life. I wanted to do more research on the matter and see what I could find out. For his sake, I decided to brush the thought out of my mind for the evening and head upstairs to check on Liam. As I got to his door, I heard some murmurs within his bedroom. I recognized the voice to be Dr. Conway and Queen Magnolia. I frowned, wondering what they were doing in his bedroom at this late hour. I pushed the door open, and they both turned to look at me. Liam was staring worriedly between the two of them, and then he looked relieved as his eyes landed on me. "Hannah," he said happily. I smiled at him. I was glad to see he was awake and looked more refreshed than he had the night before. "Hi, Liam," I said softly as I went over to his bedside. I turned to Dr. Conway and Magnolia, who were both still staring at me. "What's going on?" "Dr. Conway was just saying that Liam seems to be doing much better," Queen Magnolia said. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't read, and it was giving me an uneasy feeling. However, he thinks he would be better suited at the king's hospital, where he would be watched over 24/7. I frowned and shook my head. That wasn't part of our deal. The whole point of keeping him here was to keep him away from our father and stepmother. I wasn't going to return him to that situation. Did my father suggest that? I asked, staring at Magnolia with a firm expression. She looked puzzled at my question and shook her head. Goodness, no, she answered with fake sincerity. Dr. Conway suggested it. Isn't that right? She turned to him for backup. He nodded. He does well when others are with him constantly. I think he's better suited in an environment where he will be watched continuously and treated as needed, he explained. I couldn't tell how sincere Dr. Conway was, but I had an uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I worked at the hospital now, so I could still be around him and watch over him myself. But I didn't like the fact that he would be cooped up in the hospital walls again, instead of lying in a comfortable bed and out of our father's reach. Liam seemed to be enjoying the palace. He had everything he needed. We assigned the maid, Valerie, to tend to his needs when I wasn't around. I shook my head violently. No, I said flatly. I won't have him living at the hospital full time. There's no reason he can't stay here. Liam looked relieved to hear me say that, so I knew I was making the right choice. I gave him a reassuring smile before turning back to Magnolia. Find another punching bag, I told her, keeping my eyes locked on hers. She scoffed and folded her arms across her chest. There's a certain medication that will help keep him alive, she said, still meeting my eyes. But he can only receive the medication if he's at the hospital. What? Why was she so persistent in getting him to the hospital? What was in this for her? Nora was beginning to get impatient with the back and forth, and I could feel her rising temper within my body. I swallowed hard and grasped Liam's hands, squeezing them tightly. You can't withhold medication from my brother, I told her. I glanced over at Dr. Conway, who was visibly paling. Right? He cleared his throat. She speaks the truth, he said after a pause. We can't give him the medication here. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice trembling as I realized what was happening. They were somehow working together to get my brother out of the palace and back to the hospital. Queen Magnolia looked as innocent as she could, shrugging. Because I care. Naomi's POV. We will let you in on a little secret, but we need a favor from you, Naomi said, clutching the phone with a grin spread across her face. Amy sat beside her, eagerly waiting for a response from the other side. Why should I do anything more for you? Queen Magnolia said, her voice coming through smoothly and sending warmth through Naomi. You already asked for money. Do you need more? Not right now, Naomi told her, because you're going to want this information. An old friend has come back into town, and she could be the ticket to getting rid of Hannah, once and for all. Queen Magnolia was silent for a moment, trying to process what was being said. What is it you want? She finally asked. My stepson, Liam, Naomi told her. I want him out of the palace and back at the hospital. Why? Magnolia asked. Because Hannah is keeping him from us. It's tearing my husband apart. I hate to see that happening, she lied with a smile. First, tell me what you know, Magnolia ordered. Naomi couldn't help but laugh. Emily has returned to town, Naomi answered. She's keeping close contact with us. She told the Wolf King that she is dying of an illness. Amy has her friend, Nancy, who works at the hospital, helping her fake this illness. She's trying to keep the king as close to her as possible and away from Hannah. It's only a matter of time before Hannah snaps. Magnolia was silent for a moment before bursting into laughter. If we take Liam from her as well, she will have nothing to stay at the palace for. Both her husband and her brother will be taken from her, Magnolia said, realization dawning on her. Exactly, Naomi agreed. Take everything from her, and she will try to leave. Sebastian would never allow that to happen, though. He wouldn't just divorce her like that. He would try to stop her somehow. I'm hoping his madness will take over and he will kill her instead, Naomi admitted. What is in all of this for you? Magnolia asked, curiosity lacing her tone. I want the same thing you want, Naomi told her. You want your son to take over the throne as the new Wolf King. I want my daughter to be the Luna. Once your son is the king, he can marry my daughter Amy. Everything Hannah has now will soon be hers.